Inflation right now is going to get worse from where we are in this very moment, period. The next 2 months are going to be pretty high on the inflationary stress because people are still living in this kind of delusion that the economy is better than it is. Hey, what's going on, cash flow hackers? It is Chris with Life 180, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics yesterday just released the up-to-date CPI numbers, the inflation rate numbers. And honestly, if you didn't see my video last month, exactly what I said was going to happen happened. The numbers are getting out of control. We're getting to a place now. Inflation is over 6%. We haven't seen numbers like this in over 30 years, and most of our lifetime since the early 80s. We haven't seen numbers like this since the early 80s, late 70s, and we're definitely trending towards where inflation was in the late 70s. And I talk a lot about this in a lot of my videos and the impact that inflation has, the long-term ramifications on that inflation has on your ability to achieve your financial objectives and goals and results in your life that you're going after. And what I want to do is I want to go through these numbers with you and the statistics, and kind of go through the PDF that was dropped and take a look at and analyze some of the things that are happening in the world of inflation right now. And full transparency, I haven't gone through this yet. I do this every month. I go through this document and I try to see where the glaring challenges are, what's going on. I can tell you yesterday, I filled up my gas tank in my Jeep, and what normally would cost $45 to $48 cost me $67 to fill my Jeep here in Arizona, just because the price of gas now is $3.53 a gallon, whereas literally a couple months ago it was in the $2.60 range, right? So inflation on gas and fuel and energy is getting out of control. But you can see here what they do here is this is the month over month inflation increase. So what you have to do is you understand that the target inflation that the Federal Reserve is going after is in the 2% range. That is what that is what they would consider a healthy economy, is a 2% inflation rate. So in order to get a 2% inflation, you need a lot of these 0.1s and a lot of these 0.2s, because if you multiply those out by 12, 0.2 times 12 is 2.4%, right? So you're talking about, if you had, 9 or so of those, maybe 8 of those, and 3 or 4 of the 0.1s, that's going to get the Federal Reserve into the inflation area that they would consider a healthy economy. As soon as you get over this 0.2 number specifically, it gets to be dangerous in the inflation numbers. And it's important to understand that this bump here, a 0.3 from a 0.2, that's a significant increase. That's a 50% increase in inflation. That doesn't seem like a big number because it's only a 1/10 of a percentage point, but when you annualize that out, that becomes a big number. When you look at June, everybody, that's the 0.9 there. That's when people started to really get concerned about inflation getting out of control, and because the last couple months the numbers kind of reined in under control. If you go back and watch my video from last month, I talked about the fact that we were going to go back to June level numbers. That's what we were going to do. And the reason I said that is because we're coming into this time of the year where we had these low numbers. That, if you look at the inflation numbers in the prior releases of the CPI PDF that they're releasing with all the year-over-year updates, these numbers were bigger. The 0.1, 0.2 was in the 0.3, 0.4 range. So we're hitting this window where we have this 0.1, 0.2, 0.2 from October, November, December. That's a big increase. That's a 0.8 increase from last year to this year, right? So that puts a lot of inflationary stress on the economy. And I think with the holidays coming, with spending for the holidays coming, with the travel for Thanksgiving and the holidays coming, with all these things happening, we're going to see a big bump in these numbers. So if we're at 6.2% right now, which is what it says we are right here, if we're at 6.2% right now, and if we have another 0.9, that's 0.7 and 0.7 increase over the next 2 months, we could expect that 6.2 number to be in the 7.6 range, because add 1.4% to that. By the end of 2021, we could be at 7.5+% inflation, which are numbers that we haven't seen since the early 80s, like during our lifetime. And so during my lifetime specifically. And so that's a pretty scary thing. So, and once again, the impact that has on your financial strategy, like the bottom line is, think about it this way. When you think about inflation, and when you think about the impact inflation has on your financial, world, whenever you're investing or saving money in assets that are not either cash flowing at a higher level, they're not appreciating in value at a rate that's going to beat inflation. So like right now, you could earn 7% in your investment portfolio this year, but if inflation goes up by 7.5%, that means the nominal value, the purchasing power of your money, actually goes down in value. So you become effectively poorer in that process. So your investments, your savings, have to outpace inflation. Otherwise, it's a hidden tax on our country, and ultimately the middle classes are the people who get impacted by inflation worse than anybody else. And so what I want to do is I want to go through here, and I want to talk about the inflation adjusted numbers, and talk about the impact that has on people, because it's real. I went to Costco the other day, and looking at things, and I'm noticing and being very diligent, because I've got 3 kids, and when you have 3 kids and a family, and you go to Costco, you probably there are a lot of people watching this video that know what I'm talking about. The going to Costco is a real, you can put a real barometer. I'm pretty consistent in the things that we buy as we go there, that to supply our family with the food and dinner, and all the things that we get on a weekly basis. One of the things that I can tell you as I went this time is that I noticed there were some changes in packaging, to certain items, and the amount of packaging was shrunk. Like there wasn't as much food in it, especially with some cereals. Even though I don't buy a lot of cereals, we buy one type of cereal. The cereal amount was that actually the amount of cereal in the boxes had shrunk, and the price had gone up by 30 cents, right? So a lot of people might look at that and be like, instead of $6.99, it was $7.29. But the reality is it was $7.29, and we got about 20% less food in the process. So that is what will lead to these inflationary types of numbers in the food category. But now let's look at this, like the inflation for gasoline is out of control right now. You're talking about gasoline right now is 49.6% inflation. That is going to be hitting people really, really hard as we hit these holiday seasons, as people are traveling for Thanksgiving, and going to see family members, and so on and so forth. Electricity prices, fuel oil for homes, as we're getting into, the colder seasons. I actually had a conversation about this last month. I talked specifically about this. Inflation was already getting out of control for fuel oil, and I mentioned we're getting into the colder seasons. I live in Arizona. It's 80 degrees here right now, but going into the Midwest and the Northeast where I grew up, the temperatures are real. People are already having to spend money, to heat their homes with fuel oil. And that alone, you can see, is pushing this inflation number higher, because people are spending a lot more money on that. And you're looking at month over month, 12.3% inflation compared to last year, which is just pure insanity to me. We haven't seen these types of numbers, inflation numbers, in a long, long time. So this is another one that's just mind-blowing to me, is used cars and trucks. Numbers are out of control. There's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of that is because people aren't qualifying for new vehicles either. So those are real reasons, that people are kind of dealing with this stuff. But let me go down into here. I'm going to get down into the September to October. Let's get in. Let me find October to October unadjusted percentage change, right? So you're looking at dairy. Look at the inflation from month to month or year to year, from October 2020 to October 2021. You're talking about dairy and other related products, 11.9% inflation. That's a big deal. I'm going to just try to pick out the big ones. I mean, it's pretty sad that we're in a place where, inflation, all items for food, 6.2%, food, 5.3%, at-home food, 5.4%, cereals, like I just talked about, 3.5%, non-alcoholic beverages, 4.5%. Those used to be, if you saw inflationary numbers like that, that would be significant. That's over 100% higher than they want inflation to be. And now all of a sudden those numbers are almost just like the things that are bailing us out and making us feel like there's some sort of hope, right? These inflationary numbers around all the energy costs, electricity, is actually kind of under control at 6.5%. Utility pipe gas services, like if you have natural gas services, stuff like that, 28% increase. New and used cars and trucks, 26% year over year increase. That is absolutely insane. There's no extra value in that. That's just, a function of supply chain. It's a function of the economy. It's a function of people not qualifying for new vehicles. It's a function of, like new vehicles, because you can see here, new vehicles have gone up 9.8%. So the used vehicles, I think what's happening is people are realizing that the new vehicles, it's just the inflation is such a ridiculous increase that they're not choosing to prioritize spending money on as many new vehicles. So that's creating more demands and on the used vehicle market, and that's driving that market up, right? Like it's pretty crazy. And so let's go down here. Meat, poultry, fish. Look at all these inflationary numbers in the double digits right here. Meat, poultry, uncooked beef, beef roast, beef steaks. So beef in general, pork having a lot of stresses, breakfast sausages, bacons, all that stuff. 20% inflation on this stuff, guys. Pork chops, 16% inflation. Chicken, 10.2% inflation. Fish, 11% inflation. Eggs, 11.6% inflation. I can speak to that. I always buy the eggs by the 60 pack at Costco, and they went up, I think, like 70 cents for what normally costs. Now, at the end of the day, not that big a deal, like for an individual item, but when you itemize it out, it's crazy. Other food salts, including peanut butter, 11%. Costco was out of peanut butter, by the way. That was something I had never experienced. We eat a lot of peanut butter in this household. And Costco was completely out of peanut butter. So that actually leads me to be curious when Costco is out of peanut butter, and that has my curiosity going to like question what is the price of the peanut butter going to be when it finally gets back on the shelf, right? Like that's all legitimate stuff. Let's see here, food away from home. So here's an interesting one. Negative inflation for food at employee sites and schools. You know why? Because nobody's spending money at schools and employee sites because schools were closed down, and there's probably a lot of subsidy for stuff like that people aren't having to pay and whatnot. So energy, here we go, motor fuel, gas fuel, like you're looking at 30 to 60% inflation, 30 to 60% inflation across the board almost for all fuels, oils, gases, furniture and bedding, 12%, living, like 13% for that, laundry equipment, 15%, 14.9%, I should say, I should be specific. Transportation commodities, less motor fuel, so that's 16.5%. New and used trucks, once again, 26.4%. They just keep overlapping stuff in here. Smartphones have actually gone down in price. These manufacturers of phones are obviously trying to be competitive. I don't know how they're pulling that off, how they're not having supply issues. Cigarettes, don't smoke, guys, 9.1%. Lodging away from home. This goes along with my conversation about traveling for the holidays. If you're not staying with family and you're going to stay at a hotel, you're looking at 22.3% inflation. Hotels, motels, it's 25.5% inflation. Car and truck rentals have gone through the roof. I can speak about that with all the traveling that I've been doing back and forth to Florida. The cost of rental cars has gone through the roof. So 40%, almost 39.1% inflation on car and truck rental. That's a real thing. So at the end of the day, these when you look at the numbers here, this all has a real impact on our pocketbook, and your financial strategy. I think it's important to understand that inflation is going to get worse, right? Inflation right now is going to get worse from where we are in this very moment, period. The next 2 months are going to be pretty high on the inflationary stress because people are still living in this kind of delusion that the economy is better than it is. And if you realize and understand, a lot of people talk about the 80s as if it was this like heyday of awesomeness because the stock market did so well. But the reality is, if you look at the average return in the stock market at about 13% during the 80s, and then you back out the average inflation rate, which is about 6.5%, which is about where we are now, then the real nominal returns, as in purchasing power, value, the value of your dollar as you go through that process in the 80s, didn't really go up that much, right? Like you have to back inflation out of these numbers because it doesn't matter. Like $50,000 today doesn't buy you what $50,000 bought you in 1980, right? You have to that's inflation. That is what inflation does. I did a video a couple of weeks ago. The fact is, if you have $135,000 today and you account just at 2% inflation, 2.5% inflation, I should say, in 30 years, you're going to need $320,000 to maintain that same standard of living at $135,000 of income, right? So like when you look at the impact inflation has on it, 1 year like this, 2 years with higher inflation actually compounds against it unless you have a couple years that we have a recession, which is negative inflation, right? And so obviously nobody wants a recession, but we're in a situation right now where inflation is going to have a seriously negative impact. How you save your money, where you save your money, how you keep your money in banks, and how you're storing your money, the types of assets you're buying, the types of financial strategies that you're leveraging moving forward have to take inflation into consideration, because it is going to be it always is a serious factor in whatever financial strategy you have. It just so happens to be that right now it's kind of glaring its ugly head and making itself very overt to people that, inflation has always been considered the greatest hidden tax among the middle class. It's what I believe is the greatest transfer of wealth. The Federal Reserve tries to pass it off like inflation is a necessary positive, if not necessary evil thing, but it's a necessary component to a healthy economy. That's what they try to convince you about. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's just a way for them to transfer your wealth, to the banks and the financial institutions of the world who are using fractional reserve banking. And ultimately, what you need to understand is that if you are not investing for cash flow, and if you are not saving your money in inflation protected vehicles, and saving that money with the mindset of accumulating cash flow assets that are inflation protected and will help create more cash flow and appreciate at rates that are tied or at least pegged, if not beating inflation, then you're going to have a hard time reaching your financial objectives. So anyway, I hope this helps. I hope you found value in this. Some of the numbers gave you clarity. Really buckle down, be diligent during this time, during the next couple months during the holiday season, because the things that are happening in this world are real. Inflation is a real concern. The runaway spending, the irresponsible spending by our government, the money printing, the tens of trillions of dollars in debt. We're almost $30 trillion in debt. This is all real stuff, and it's going to have real consequences, and you cannot avoid the consequences as a nation with this. I'm a big believer. This is going to tip us into a point where there are going to be challenges. I'm not sure if it's going to be inflationary or deflationary. Depends on kind of the pundits that you listen to and that you believe. There's the Peter Schiffs of the world that believe inflation is out of control. There's the Harry Dents of the world that, is concerned about inflation, but is more concerned about deflation, believe it or not, because of the demographic cycles of everything. And he just believes that no matter what, the stresses on the economy are going to be more deflationary because of demographics, and those are the kind of stresses that you cannot fight. And because of that, because we are so inflated, he thinks there's going to be such a big crash. And so what I would encourage you to think about is, how do you position yourself to succeed in any environment? And that's what this is all about. That's why we've been talking a lot about the concept of cash flow hacking, because it's not how much money you have, it's what that money can do for you, and what that money does for you in the quality of life, your lifestyle, covering your expenses, and making sure that your lifestyle is not impeded in any economic environment is based on the cash flow that you have coming through. And so your ability to set your life up to invest for cash flow is really going to have the greatest impact on your ability to be successful when it comes to reaching your personal financial objectives. So anyway, I hope that helps. I hope you found value in it. If you did, please smash that like button. That way the YouTube algorithm gets it out there to more people. If you haven't already, click the subscribe button, hit the bell. That way you get notified every single time we launch a new video. And that's it for now. I hope you have a blessed, inspirational day. We'll talk to you soon. See ya.